Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Friday, January 15th. We're starting at 4:20. Coincidence there. Um, yep, starting a little later. Woke up. Sleep schedule's still weird. So, yeah, that's still happening. Um, well, I guess we could just easily jump into the accountability section since not much is different. I'm still playing Fear 2. I finally gave in and looked up like a Wikipedia uh slash separate game wiki for Fear 2 and Fear to figure out why there are two Almas in the story, a younger 10-year-old Alma and an older naked 16-year-old, it turns out, Alma, and there still seems to be like no real explanation. It makes very, very little sense. Although, in fairness to Fear 2, I probably have one, maybe two levels left, and the younger girl, who I was saying was the innocence of Alma, has seemingly completely disappeared. So we only have the 16-year-old naked thing. The story is just written, frankly. Fear 2 really just redoes both storyline wise and in gameplay. It's really just taking the same hitting points, the major plot points of uh, Fear 1, and doing it all over again. Just soft rebooting the game effectively. In a worse way, because at least when you were playing as Point Man, you were one of two almost children who they put her in a coma when she was 10 because she was psychic and started a fire because Armacam was abusing her and doing horrible experiments to her. And then at some point between 10 and 16, they impregnated her twice, I believe when she was 15, then 16. Then they stole her children, and the impregnations were part of a bigger experiment to make psychic leaders to run to control the replicant soldiers, who apparently they developed these replicant soldiers perfectly without having a way to control them first. So theoretically there's like only two leaders that could possibly, guess we'll do forest craft. That should work fairly well today. um, I've really been dropping the ball as far as doing these daily entries. Um, but yeah, there's just Point Man, the main character you play as in the first game, and then there's the bad guy in the first game, and those are the only two people that can even control the replicant soldiers, as far as it seems. Uh, so yeah, I finally just had to break down and say the truth of the matter is, 2009, clearly there was not a mature adult in the room when they thought up the story for Fear 2, at the very least to fix the problems with Fear 1, or go back to 2006, I believe, is Fear 1, um, maybe even 2005, maybe even a little earlier than that. But had somebody at all thought to say, like, why is our major plot point, and this was said in Fear 1, that the daughter of the father, uh, the 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 daughter of the guy in charge of Armacam, just magically has these telekinetic properties, which is weird because in Fear 2 they make it seem like she was given some kind of drugs and they were experimenting on her to give her the telekinetic properties, but I don't think that's the case. I think she had the telekinetic properties. Then they put her in a school where they were giving drugs to other kids to see if they had telekinetic properties also. Uh, but yeah, I don't know why you would experiment on your own daughter. I don't know why you would uh, write a story where the 10-year-old girl is seemingly a murderer, it, even before they put her in a coma. and definitely a murderer at 16. Like it's like, so it's this weird story of we're gonna abuse this girl until she's 10, then we're gonna put her in a coma and do more experiments and abuse her more, and then when she's 15 we're gonna abuse her more and effectively rape her and force her to have children, who she seemingly, as best as you can even figure for her personality, seems to actually not be happy about the babies being taken away from her, and then at 16 they kill her and leave her in this amniotic fluid sensory deprivation tank for another 10 years, and then it's when she's affected, her spirit is effectively chronologically 26 years old. That's the Alma that gets freed in the first game, is this spiritual 26-year-old that's really in the body of a desiccated 16-year-old who would have been in the sensory deprivation tank for 10 years or 6 years. Yeah, I guess 6 years would be the thing. Like the whole story just falls apart and is creepy. And it really would not have taken but one person to come into that story, come into that meeting room and say, hey, let's adjust these ages a little bit. If we want a creepy grudge-like girl, which is clearly part of their influence, then they should just focus with that. Like the way they depict the young Alma is that she's in like this red dress. It's fine. It doesn't have to be that unique. That she could have been the only Alma in the story, or you could have had a creepy dead kind of zombie grudge-like character and just move the age up a little bit. Like you could easily have said she was 18, 19, at least get over the age of consent to eliminate some of that creepiness. But they clearly had almost a fetish to not do that. Because otherwise that would have happened. There needs to be much better explanation as to why all this is happening in the first place.
Continue to believe. Help me, fairies. A fitting end.
Let's go ahead and hit that.
A fitting end.
And then, since that is the story of Fear 2, because there is no Paxton Fettel, or whatever his name is, like there is in the first game. Instead, in the second game, you're just chasing after your own team members who are getting enthralled and controlled by Alma, or you're just chasing after Alma for no reason. There's a big point in the middle of the story where you have to deal with Snake Fist, this loser self-insert character that, honestly, yeah, it really gives more to the theory that the creators of this game thought they were so cool and so edgy, and maybe in 2009 they were slightly cool and edgy, but in 2021 it really is just a loser self-insert character, and he plays really no role. There was a loser hacker character that played a bigger role in the first game, and I think honestly they're literally just taking the same idea. It feels like they literally, and I'm saying literally too much now, it feels like they may have had one pitch meeting where they said, all right, let's just redo everything that was in the first game and let's make minor tweaks. There's no stories whatsoever. At a certain level, it almost seems logical that that would be the thing they would do, because of the fact that the Fear series is effectively just a multiplayer game for gamer bros. So it would make a lot of sense that they might very accurately have read the room and said, well, these gamer bros that Microsoft introduced with games like Halo don't care about the story at all, so we shouldn't care about the story. We should just have a single player story that has some fear elements, where almost certainly the multiplayer has no fear elements at all, and it's just military shooting, and it shows off the guns. It does a pretty terrible job about showing off the guns too, because one, you don't ever really get a large cache of bullets when you get a new gun, and it's often trying to have you cycle between guns. You can only hold 4, and I'm in a situation, I finally hit a situation near the end where I had 2 guns I really didn't want to use. Like, a rocket launcher isn't going to be very useful in many scenarios, because you'll just blow yourself up if it's a small closed quarters. And then the game told me to hold on to a pulse gun and use it against Olma, so I've been holding on to one of the 4 slots has been this pulse gun that has been around for half of the game, and I would be very surprised if it turns out, I wouldn't be surprised actually if it turns out that the pulse gun doesn't even work particularly effectively against Olma. They often give you like laser guns that are too slow. They've also got some sniper rifle guns that don't have enough bullets. The assault gun is kind of the only gun that is the right gun to use. Hit that. And then hit that. Why do I keep taking damage every time I attack? This doesn't feel fair.
It won't be long now.
Might as well evolve. I'm about to lose.
People are evil. Stay away.
Yeah, they put something on the field where I'm gonna lose, because the only thing I could hope to do is make them run out of cards, and them doing 2 damage to me, it's almost certainly going to stop that from happening.
You're strong.
So yeah, been playing Fear 2. I may very well not get around to actually scheduling the story mode levels so that they air at the right time if I'm not careful. I want to finish Fear 2, then I'll do a little bit of scheduling, and then I need to play another horror game, at least one, for second Halloween. Then I've got several other things to schedule. But otherwise, I think that's pretty much all I've been doing. Just that and a lot of sleeping. A lot of interrupted sleeping. Where I'll sleep for a couple hours and then get woken up right in the middle of REM sleep or just after it. And it just doesn't feel like very efficient, peaceful sleep. There is also certainly some TV I've managed to watch. Like, I watched Captain America the Winter Soldier. That's pretty bad. But yeah, there's man. Give me a second. I want to respond to a text. Well, I'm in the middle here. That's something I'm not going to get into. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. Literally just responding to text at this point. I shouldn't do that for sure. There was this gadget at CES, a pin UV replicator. Not replicator. That would be genius and amazing if you could replicate pins or anything. It's a UV light cleaner for pins, and it what you do is you take a pin from the bottom, you sign it, and then you put a pin in the slot at the top, and it runs all of the pins through a UV light to sanitize it, which is a interesting gadget. Certainly UV cures regular plastic, so apparently they're going to have to use proprietary pins, which might raise the price compared to the cheapest plastic pins you could ever find. And at a certain point you might very well just be better off still using cheap pins and letting the UV light cure it. But yeah, I definitely have seen at like doctors' offices and in schools instances where it would make a lot of sense for somebody to not want to just hand out a new pin to every single person that walked into the place, and yet they still also want to be very careful. There's also a handle that would automatically spray the handle with like alcohol after somebody touched it, which, yeah, I can see that. I can see that that there will potentially be a new generation of self-sterilizing things that are commonly touched, and that could not only help us with current we could certainly combat a lot of the sickness that way and just increase cleanliness. There is, unfortunately, a floor that exists where some people simply just don't wash their hands properly or don't wash their hands at all, and those are the percentage of people I think that are just going to be forever lost, and there's no amount of education or persuading that can be done on them, unless we're gonna straight up just throw them in re-education classes, camps for not washing their hands, which would be kind of crazy and extreme, but heck, we might get there at some point. Or throw them in jail for not washing their hands, which that is an interesting thought, certainly, as far as why are certain things illegal versus other things. The general idea, one would assume, is that things are illegal because they possess some harm to either individuals of society or all of society, which is not always the case when you look at like the war on drugs and things like that, because that clearly was made illegal as a way of voter suppression by Ronald Reagan, and that has been pretty much undisputedly proven at this point. So at a certain point, it comes down to how dangerous is dangerous enough to potentially throw somebody in jail or fine them. Like, even I personally, as someone who tries to be incredibly clean and probably germophobic, I was just not raised in a generation where you were supposed to cough or sneeze into an elbow, so I don't have that natural instinct to do that, and that is probably much to the horror of younger generation of people who have been taught to do that.
Stay away.
Yeah, but I suppose that
I need more cuddles.
there that has nothing to do with video games. And we do have some video game news, so for video game streaming stuff, there's a new plug-in for OBS called Transition Tables that I'm thinking about if there's a way I could integrate something like that into my workflow. I don't use a lot of transitions. When I go over to the screen peek, it's just a simple fade because that's efficient and it just saves on time. I'm not trying to do anything super fancy that blows people out of the water as far as visuals. But yeah, I could certainly see if for more direct and average Twitch streamers having more transitions specifically programmed. What Transition Tables does is it allows you to create a path from point A to point B, and in that path use a very specific transition instead of previously existing transitions where it was anything that goes to this scene should have this transition. And that's a big difference, frankly. Like, if you have a screen that says stream is starting in 5 minutes and it's just counting down, and then that goes to your regular screen where it shows your gameplay, you probably would want a different transition from that point to that point than, say, a screen that goes from your regular gameplay to showing the chat to bringing back the regular gameplay without the chat. You probably at that point don't want the same transition from chat to regular gameplay that you had from the countdown to regular gameplay. At a certain level, personally though, I don't know how much that helps anything. These are very minimal things you do to your stream to improve it, but you have to kind of have that audience, you have to kind of have that success first and foremost. It would be educational, and if it's fun to tweak your streaming settings on OBS, by all means have fun with it, but the competition is not really that high as far as the visual aesthetics for streamers. There's still a lot of fairly good streamer people that don't do anything. Like, look at Game Grumps, for example. They're just right now playing Danganronpa, which I'm spoiling that entire game by watching it, and that definitely was a game I was gonna play. But they're just putting the full screen of the gameplay on the screen with no real effects, no real anything. There's an intro that they had done before the pandemic, and they're just talking to each other through like Skype, and you're just hearing their audio. So it's exactly the same thing that I'm doing right now, and that's Game Grumps, who have millions of subscribers. And I think that's what most people want. I think it is a very different experience that you're looking for if you're looking for a Twitch streamer that's got face cam and they're playing some kind of MOBA or something that doesn't really matter. It's not the main focus of the game. And then they've, on top of having face cam, they've got half of the screen with like Twitch chat happening. Which, speaking of Twitch, that Pog emote that they said they were going to replace with a new emote every single day, they've already given up on that. Apparently there was enough controversy around that. It was a dumb offering in the first place, so there was a thought there, certainly, that they should have never made that offer, and they should have just said, hey, we're getting rid of this because the person who made this emote went on Twitter and posted, I think I saw a bunch of anti-white people rants, which, alright, fair enough. Like, but I think in their stupid concept to try and go above and beyond, they just overcommitted. And I certainly have done that in the past too, where I've gotten way too ambitious and then regretted it immediately after saying it. There definitely were a decent number of school projects where I got really, really excited and ambitious at the beginning, and then pretty immediately never put any effort into it, or never could have put enough effort into it to really accomplish what needed to be accomplished. That was certainly true in my programming classes. Like, I definitely was in a programming class where I had just kind of done all of the work for the entire semester already. It was a weird case where the teacher was probably not that good of a teacher to allow such a scenario to happen in the first place. But it did happen, and so I basically was just being given free time at that point to do whatever I wanted. And so I hyper ambitiously thought, oh, I'll see how far I can get down the path of making an operating system. And this was at a point where maybe I had 2 years of programming of C++. C++ does not immediately go down to like assembler language, and I don't know if I even knew assembler language existed at the time. So there was, even if I had made anything that even looked like a operating system, it really wouldn't have worked like an operating system at any kind of realistic speed. Like, and things like the difference between a real-time operating system and Windows is something that I didn't even know about until like a week ago, in the sense that Windows does not, as an operating system, just let everything happen in real time. That's why you can hit Control-Alt-Delete and end the task. A real-time operating system, which is probably an operating system that would only exist for like high-level, probably quantum computer processing these days. But yeah, you wouldn't be able to interrupt things. In that case, it would just happen, or it would lock up. 4 damage. 14 or less.
I shall give birth to a new world.
Okay, what else can we do? But yeah, I got super ambitious in there. Didn't get very far, but also didn't really waste a lot of time on it at all. But had I been smarter and had I known about Linux at the time, I could have probably made a few more bits of progress there. Not to say that I could from scratch program an operating system now. At least I would know generally what to do. I would understand, okay, where these are the parts of the memory you have to address to access different parts of the equipment, and here's the concept of drivers, and here's the concept of a kernel. And once you understand all those concepts, you realize, oh, that's totally not what programming yourself. You should just use the Linux kernel. And once you make that step, it's only another step to say, hey, what you really want to do, more than likely, is not program an operating system. You probably just want to make a custom flavor of Linux that looks the way you think it should look, or works the way you think it should work, because the deep dive of the core components is not really worth it. This would evolve this guy and then return 4 points. which wouldn't let me play this. I'll try and play this. I don't know what this is about to do.
This ends here. I've got all the magic I need. Here goes.
That was a bit of a ramble. I watched Captain America Winter Soldier. Yeah, I don't think there's much more for me to say about that, though. I already mentioned that. It's just kind of a redundant, repetitive movie. It doesn't really do a good job of actually focusing around the Winter Soldier, nor does it do really a great job of doing anything for the Marvel Universe other than getting rid of S.H.I.E.L.D. and just kind of reintroducing Hydra, and both of those elements were fairly quickly forgotten about 2 movies later, and in favor of building up towards the Thanos arc, which they had already been hinting at from the first one. Like, the difference between a standalone Iron Man movie like Iron Man 2 and Captain America Winter Soldier is the fact that S.H.I.E.L.D's there and Captain America is dealing with Hydra, dealing with so many other people, whereas the Iron Man movies are much more of personal affairs. They're talking about bringing back the actor who played Captain America for more movies, although probably as just like cameos would be my guess. I don't think we're going to get a ton of more of Captain America movies because he's just not the greatest character to write stories about. I also watched Bleach Fade to Black, which is, I think, an anime movie I'd already seen, but there's 2 on Netflix, and I'm just trying to clear out my Netflix Netflix watch list, which is incredibly long and full of a lot of things that I ambitiously want to watch, but I never really have time for. And I'm sitting around watching Netflix instead of playing video games, which definitely goes to show that Fear 2 is not really catching my attention. To the point where I've pretty much feel like I'm not going to play the DLC at this point. And that's going to kind of suck. But it's going to be really, really hard to justify playing more Fear 2 just to play the DLC. But honestly, that may only add like 5 more episodes anyway, so I might as well just buckle down and do it. There is, with DLC, an issue where if I install the game, then I have to leave the game installed to play the DLC, and I have to remind myself to play the DLC, and that just makes a mess, certainly, as far as do I really want to wait till October to play the DLC to Fear 2, or do I want to play a completely different game in October and not touch a Fear game until a year from that point to play Fear 3? Ideally, I think I don't want to. I would like to just be done with it. Alright, well, as I am once again losing, we are not getting good experience here, which is really no surprise. Like, deck rebuilds. I need to start net decking more than anything, and I really just need to figure out a great way to start net decking for Shadowverse, to see what cards I have and to see what kind of deck I can play, because we're at like 80 to 90% of all my decks are just not winners. Anyways, let's start talking about video game news. We have a Tech Raptor article. Dreamers is a next-gen 3D adventure game coming this year. There was talk in the last stream of them announcing the Indiana Jones game. I could kind of see a 3D Indiana Jones game that was a point and click adventure, I don't think it would look like this. Well, first of all, I definitely would not be happy to see low polygonal images and Looney Tune sides of buildings. But also, I don't know if you're adding much to the game or anything to the game by allowing people to wander around and uh and like get lost in an area. Like, this looks like a possibly interesting point and click adventure for a unique story. But when you have established things, established characters like Indiana Jones, it's got to really, really look like Indiana Jones. So, which definitely does make an argument that you, well, if you give a map and maybe you can jump to the map, that's fine. But at a certain point, if you're going to have open areas, you feel it makes it feel like you're more of this. Is this really a point and click adventure game? No, it's not. It's actually just an adventure game. I don't know what, I misread that. Yeah. If you're going to have open areas, then you have to have kind of collectibles and RPG elements. This game is weird looking. Definitely. It seems like it's kind of all over the place as far as having an adventure game in a real world environment that is both urban and more forest like, having no face, low polygon characters. It almost feels a little bit like Psychonauts. And the name is Dreamer, so you, I guess, assume that this is a dream. Yeah, that's a weird looking game, and it was kind of a terrible comparison to Indiana Jones after I figured out more about it. Yeah. But yeah, you can definitely tell that I'm more hyped on the potential thought of an Indiana Jones game than the final product. Because it definitely does feel like half of the game has to be a visual novel style, Telltale style game. That there is just going to be a lot of conversation going up to it or not. And you can, I think, only go so far to add combat before you are doing something like the Lego Indiana Jones games did, and all the Lego games do, where they're just throwing the same enemies at you over and over again. Yeah, and that might work, but it would fall apart fairly quickly if Machine Gun Games gives you just level after level of you running around shooting people or whipping people as Indiana Jones, shooting and whipping either Soviets or Nazis. That's another point, certainly, to mention. They very intentionally moved the story up in the Crystal Skull so that you were fighting the Soviets, not the Nazis, in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And I think that was very intentionally done, because if the U.S. in its current time does have a major enemy, it would be the former USSR. So unless they're going to move the story up further and we're fighting communist Chinese people, or which the timeline really wouldn't line up with that, we're almost certainly going to be fighting Soviets in a new Indiana Jones game. There is possibly a middle ground story that could be told, where Indiana Jones gets hired by the FBI or CIA of the time to go hunt down Nazis, and you're shooting a lot more people than you normally would think he would shoot, simply because this is like some secret spy mission. that he was on, and he never talks about it after that point. Or if it's anything like the movie that I expect to come out, I bet it'll be Indiana Jones is fairly old, and they've kind of implied that's not the case. I think the idea is they'll have a game where Indiana Jones is young and adventurous, and then we'll see him playing the role of a very old man in the movie. They talked about on the Beastcast how they really don't feel like Harrison Ford would do a good job or care about voice acting for a video game, and I kind of agree. Like, I think he would probably phone it in, and it's fairly consistently I have said that face actors and movie actors, oops, I missed 2 hits there, are not the same as video game voice actors or animation voice actors, and they don't do as good of a job. Yeah, I feel like there should be a lot of puzzles in an Indiana Jones game. I feel like you've got to pull far away from trying to do a God of War as Indiana Jones. You could do a little bit of that, but if you're making something like Tomb Raider or Uncharted, I think you've missed the mark there. You need a lot more puzzles, a lot more archaeological things. The reboot of Tomb Raider in particular in the first game tried to be very archaeological, and you'd pick up these items that didn't really matter. But that I think was fairly abandoned in the sequel games, and it was never really embraced in the first games anyways. I want to evolve.
It won't be long now.
Hit that, and then hit that, and hit that. Let's move on with the news. Gematsu has an article here. A tower defense beat 'em up called The Last Friend launches this spring for consoles. I feel like we may at this point start to be getting announcements for games. Yeah, I think I've saw this on Steam as a game coming out as kind of a Plants vs. Zombies tower defense, line tower defense game with beat 'em up abilities, which maybe at that level you've put enough elements in your game to not have your game just immediately dismissed as a tower defense game. But otherwise it is dangerously still close to being immediately dismissed as a tower defense game. We got 30 gold last time. We get 30 gold this time. They certainly aren't rewarding me much for 5 games worth of effort, regardless of the fact that I lost all of them. And basically no rewards for this either. Alright, so come over here. Unlimited. Havencraft. Keep it interesting. Gematsu has an article here. The Otome visual novel Ephemeral Fantasy on Dark is coming to the Switch on January 21st. Otome being young maiden, meaning a visual novel that's usually a romance story surrounded by some cute anime boys. So we're getting more announcements. It's been a while since I've had to mention Otome or explain it. At a certain point, also, it gets fairly repetitive. And I've certainly seen that with like the Super Beard Bros on YouTube, where if you watch, I would say about a year's worth of content that they've made, which takes much less time than a year, you'll start to see that they have these kind of they feel like they're improv jokes, but actually they're just the same jokes being repeated over and over again, and they've been practiced and scripted. And certainly in the cult-like atmosphere of improv, that is something that they highly discourage. You also hear that on a lot of like morning talk radio and stuff, where people are doing these same bits and stealing the same ideas from everybody because they're just making so much content, and frankly they're just not naturally interesting. Which is not to say that I think I am naturally interesting by any means. It's just to say that you cannot fill that much time and that much air without being repetitive. Some people can't. I personally would kind of prefer to stay quiet, or just be awful and go and ah over trying to script something. But yeah, that I do have a slight fear that some of the times when I'm explaining like Otome, or when I'm just talking about the 100th cheap Chinese game that was listed on Steam in a week, I'm getting fairly more repetitive than even average for me, which is pretty high average anyways. See.
My blade is your salvation. My power is waking. Time to dance.
If anything, I would say we're in an odd situation with Japanese games where it feels like they're announcing more games, even though it feels like Japan is really not out of the pandemic or in the mood to actually try and do business. I think there's just a lot of cases all around the world, and not specifically in Japan even, where companies are just trying to push ahead. They're just trying to push ahead. I'd also want to mention that since it's slightly video game related, it seems like there's a fairly high amount of stock manipulation going on around the price of GameStop that is in part being done through Wall Street bets on Reddit, where people are betting, and nobody should listen to them or follow them for any kind of like buying advice, because it is literally just crazy people either pretending like they're betting millions of dollars on things or actually betting millions of dollars. One hopes that these aren't actually investors with people's retirements and portfolios, but I frankly would not be surprised if it is investors gambling with people's retirement portfolios. But to me, it definitely seems like it might be a pump and dump. It might be that someone from GameStop, or someone who just owns a lot of GameStop stock, is trying to pump up the value before they sell all their shares. And there's nothing, which is often the case in shareholders and stock prices, and this is one of the best arguments that exists for there to not exist stocks at all, that they should just not exist, is that speculation creates a massive amount of difference in the valuation of a share compared to actual good business practices. Like in this instance, you can definitely see that GameStop is not getting better as a company. They're not making more money as a company. They're not doing anything that would justify their shares going up, and yet their shares are going up just because of insane either stock manipulation or insane speculation. And it probably shouldn't be the case. I don't know how you really fix that. Like my easy solution is get rid of shareholders and get rid of shares in the first place, and all companies have to be private, and all companies can only be of a certain size, and I think that would help society way better than having people have a retirement tied to gambling, which is what the stock market is, regardless of what people want to say, instead of having retirements tied to government bonds, which is guaranteed guaranteed returns on a 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, however long the bond is, basis. You buy a $100 bond at a discounted price, usually a pretty set discounted price, I think, and then it is worth $100 in 1 year, 2 year, 5 years time. And the only risk there is that if you buy a U.S. government bond and the U.S. government collapses, well, then you're in big trouble. And at that point, bullets would have been the only retirement that would have been safe. But assuming that doesn't happen, you're fairly safe with bonds. Whereas plenty of people lost entire retirements in high risky portfolios that often they don't even know were risky portfolios, or in Bernie Madoff style schemes, or other schemes like Bernie Madoff's, or other schemes that are completely different from Bernie Madoff's.
I soar the skies in the name of justice.
Anyways, that's more economics than video games, though. We have a TechRaptor article, Cinderella Phenomenon, Evermore review, which, interesting. This feels to me like a visual novel, and this would be, to my recollection, the first visual novel that they've ever reviewed on TechRaptor. They did say on TechRaptor that they were hiring more people and trying to do trying to do more things. And frankly, I'm not super surprised that a female presenting staff writer would be one that would do something like this, since this does definitely feel like an otome visual novel. Although, arguably, probably wouldn't fall into the category of an otome young maiden, because when they say young maiden, they're talking like 14, 15, 16-year-old Japanese girls. They're not talking somebody who could be a staff writer who's probably mid-20s, early 30s. They gave it an 8.5, wonderfully crafted follow-up to the fantastic first game. Evermore doesn't have the same emotional highs and lows, but it's still fun. Fillery goodness for those who are looking to return to the world of Cinderella Phenomenon. Prose, gorgeous visuals and music, well-rounded, fun characters, and sweet storylines. Cons, no high-stakes storylines. What's interesting here is it's on Steam, but I don't specifically know what to do with this information.
Now, if you would please look to your right.
Because a well-reviewed visual novel, like, here's the original visual novel, not the sequel that was just reviewed. Something like this on Steam, overwhelmingly positive, is free to play for the first game. So then I guess the question would become,
Repent.
Come on.
Repent.
why is my internet down?
Any questions?
Seriously? I'm gonna miss a whole turn because of this? Well, yeah, I don't know what you take from that, though. I guess I probably did at some point see Cinderella Phenomenon. It was a 2017 game, so it is slightly possible I missed it, but not incredibly likely I would have missed it. Wi-Fi's still working on my cell phone. It's just everything here seems to have decided to stop working on my computer. And that's going to be a problem. Certainly, because I can't do anything without the internet. It says no internet connection. I guess, do I use Windows to try and fix this? Like, I'm gonna run out, so see if we can use Windows Network adapter to see if it can reset the internet connection. This almost never works. Networking reset. Oh, they're trying to reboot the whole computer now. Come on, seriously? I should have rebooted my router is what I should do. Let's try that instead. Windows is just useless. Totally useless. It's literally faster to SSH into my router, reboot it, and than it is to try and do anything with Windows networking, which never works because it's never quite Microsoft's fault, even if they think it's Microsoft's fault. Well, here's the thing that may not actually work. Also, because if the network is just down everywhere, then I can't log into the router that way because it can't email that says, hey, somebody just logged into the router. This is going to be crazy if it turns out that somebody just bumped the plug. Oh, man. How much buffer? I guess the buffer's not a big deal. I may just have to pause and run. Let's see if somebody bumped the cord. This is totally not what you want to have happen in the middle of a stream. Although, in all fairness, this is also something that hasn't happened ever before. We've had little network hiccups, but not just a complete network loss. Alright, well, I think I'm about to be signed out in 2 minutes. Oh, come on. How do we stop Windows from doing that? Let's see. Stop Windows, sign out. Yeah, the automatic sign out thing, I don't know how to stop that either. Alright, well, I guess what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pause the recording, mute my mic, run and see what happens. Very possibly while I'm gone away, get signed out, and try to get all this back on track. This is just a mess. What a mess of a way to stream. So, okay, I'm back. If I am back, otherwise this is going to be just a reboot of the live stream. Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and just in case I didn't say that, and we're going to live stream Shadowverse and talk about video game news. My internet decided to completely poop the bed, as it were, and I don't know if that previous footage of an hour's worth, which was a lot of just warm up anyways, is going to be recoverable or not. So let's just hop back into the game and hop back into making progress there. Lesson learned from that incident immediately: don't let Windows do anything to a network. It almost certainly is a bad mistake to let Microsoft do anything, particularly when they want to auto log you out, which then closes your recording software without stopping the recording. Second lesson learned there: instead of pausing the video and the recording there, I should have stopped the recording completely, and then I could have started the recording again. Even leaving it streaming, those are different buttons, so that would have not been a problem at all. So I that was a mistake too. But yeah, everything seems to be mostly back to normal. So let's try and get through the video game news. Trying to get Forestcraft, Havencraft victories. And we would have gotten the Havencraft victory, I think, had I not lost the internet connection. We were talking about this Otome visual novel, Cinderella Phenomenon Evermore, which is $9.99, which gives you a weird experience because TechRaptor reviewed it, and this is like the first visual novel I think TechRaptor has ever reviewed. And TechRaptor has not been shy to partner with Nutaku and cover adult games. I don't think this is an adult game. I don't think that there's any like nudity or even sexually highly suggestive content here. I think it is probably just a pure love romance type story that they're gonna tell. But I don't know how to integrate this, because I could put this on the follow list, and that's probably the best move. Let's put this on the follow list, see what the general people say, general Steam users say, whether it's a really good game. We know that the free-to-play version here is 95 positive of 67 reviews recently, and overwhelmingly positive, 96% positive of 3,166 reviews for free. So, yeah. And it does seem like the graphics have been slightly improved. I still have yet to figure out to tweak my settings to get the screenshots to load better. The animation here is good. This hands praying image I thought was something else on first glance, but then you have just like eyeless, faceless characters that obviously aren't important. And yep, once again, my settings as far as the screenshots. So it comes down to the idea of, I guess, putting this game that's free, which is the original game, and comparing it to the sequel. If the sequel's good enough to buy, and if I am going to cover visual novels, which is a big if in itself, then it's probably a case where I should I should cover it. But that's a lot of ifs there. I'm not sure I really do want to play otome visual novels, not being a young maiden myself. That's not to say that a video game critic can just easily or should be able to easily dismiss all games not directly made for themselves. The critics have to be able to empathize and think from the perspective of the target audience, otherwise they're terrible critics. But yeah, I might play one or two otome visual novels, in the sense that I've also been thinking I may only want to play the top 10 visual novels that exist at all, and maybe none of those are actually otome. So that all is very back burner, like early concept thoughts that I have. As far as new categories of games I might cover. Moving on with the video game news, we have Blue Fire launching February 4th for PC and Switch, later for PS4 and Xbox One. What is Blue Fire?
Now, if you would please look to your right.
I haven't seen anything that looks like this. This logo looks a lot like the Digipin logo, except for it's backwards. Which, yeah, I guess that is a decent logo. Yeah, it seems like it's a hack and slash adventure game with platforming. Theoretically, I like those kinds of games. In practice, they often are pretty awful. Also, we've seen a ever-increasing number of badly made, cheap, low-effort asset flip games that have parkour in them. So it's become trivial to make those kinds of games. What's not so trivial is having like custom art, and that's what we're seeing a lot of here, is that this does seem to have at least some thematic consistency in the art. So yeah, Blue Fire looks like something that might catch my attention. Let's see. What can we do? You can hit this. You can evolve this. We can hit that. We can hit that. We can hit that. And then I guess we end the turn. Tech Raptor has an article here. Super Mario 3D World, Super Mario 3D World, comma, or colon, Bowser's Fury gameplay revealed. This is DLC that they're releasing, which, okay, that's cool, but it's also a little weird that DLC, apparently they've got a new 30th year anniversary for Mario games logo. I feel like this game is not a new game, Super Mario 3D World. I thought that was a Wii U game that they just ported to Switch. So are they revitalizing it somehow? Or with Bowser's Fury and DLC? I guess that might very well be the case. And yeah, this definitely feels like Mario 64 with a little bit of even Mario Sunshine in it. Interesting. And Bowser definitely looks pretty hardcore in that. It looks like there's a whole platforming parkour boss battle there. With a swimming Yoshi. Interesting. So giant cat Mario versus giant Bowser. It seems like they've gone a little bit overboard with the cat suit Mario. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is kind of a consistent issue with where the people in charge of making Mario games are now, is that they want to introduce new concepts, and nobody really wants new concepts in Mario games. They just want nostalgia. Apparently it's also coming, there's a new red and blue Switch coming out also. But there is also rumors that there is potentially a Switch Pro in development, so you're in a kind of a weird position as far as if you want to think about making a new making a new purchase for a Switch. Yeah, you're probably fairly safe until Christmas 2021 at this point, unless you just have to get it for some kid's birthday. Like, if you haven't gotten a Switch at this point, I think you're safe. Do this. And then evolve this.
Welcome our friends to the forest. You can't escape us.
That.
I'm going home now.
And then that.
Looks like my job here is done.
And that.
Hey, let's play.
And that. I have like 1 damage, 1 health. I think there's no way I survive this. Gamatsu has an article here. Blaze Blue Alternative Dark War launches February in Japan, which this is apparently an iOS Android Blaze Blue fighting game. I don't think this is the Arc System Works game that was a spin-off of a different game. This is different. I don't know if this really is a fighting game at all. This might be just some weird gacha game. Yeah. What kind of game is this? Chain Combo X Novel. Blaze Blue Alternative Dark World. It's a free-to-play with in-app purchases game. An RPG developed as a generous sequel to the Blaze Blue series, featuring episodes from the Dark War that started the series. Am I completely wrong here? Is Blaze Blue not a fighting game at the core of it? I thought it was more a fighting game, but they're giving you an RPG game. So, whatever. I mean, that is very often the case, is that the mobile version of game goes in a completely different direction than the regular versions of the game. Gamatsu has an article here. Lily Shiroki Yuri no Otome Taichi's S is launches January 21st in Japan. Switch version of a strategy RPG gets a release date. Which I wouldn't have thought it was a RPG game at first, because what this basically translates to is Lily : this person's name, Shiroki Yuri, the young maiden Taichi, whatever Taichi stands for, as an honorific, and then S for Switch version. Generally, this art style of chibi young girls isn't really, it's a little too young for what I would think an otome is, but then again, in Japanese games, these could be 18-year-old characters, the way things are drawn. They're calling it a stress-free RPG. Eliminates all random numbers and puts every element within the calculations of the player. And since characters grow based on story progression, there's no need to earn those pesky experience points during battle. With a focus on strategy and stress-free playability, this is the ultimate RPG. That's an interesting idea. It's almost like they're trying to make a girl-friendly RPG in Japan. Like, which may very well be the case. Like, most RPG games are focused from a male perspective, to say the least. I would say Dragon Quest is maybe not terrible about that, but also I don't think there are too many main characters that you can play as that are female in the Dragon Quest series, and that would probably be fairly consistent in
the name of justice.
in a lot of JRPGs. So yeah, that sounds like an interesting game. I'll keep an eye out for it. Next we have a game called Object N, which seems like it's gonna obviously be a low effort zombie shooter. Free, I guess the price is right. English, full audio, allegedly at least. Still not really sure why people put out whether vertical slices of games or tech demos of games on Steam. I don't even know why you would waste the $100. Like, it's obviously not a lot of money, but why waste any money when you don't have anything to return that money? Because there's no in-app purchases for games like these. There's no sales for games like these. This game, it says, it has online PvP. The only thought you could think is that it's trying to be advertising, but then why make your advertising free game look like a low effort garbage game? That also doesn't make any sense. There. Should we evolve this one? Guess we might as well. Next we have a game on Steam here called Raven World, which looks like it's a strategy placement game. It seems like it's a mobile port, and there's just a ton of overlay on it. Heads up display, menus, which ruins the visuals of it. It's early access, it's $4.99, it's English only. It's nothing there of interest.
I'm through.
I'm winning fairly well with the Haven craft, so I should just stick with it.
So long as there is light.
Next we have Andromeda 2 Zombies, which I'll say the zombie textures here actually look a little bit better than some of the low polygon ones we've seen, but they still look like a game from 2005. And otherwise it's just an asset flip, free to play game. Here we have a game called Warts Chaff's Wochi Virtual Reality. How an electric car is created or save a person's life in the hospital of the future. Seems like two very, very different things that they've merged together in a VR experience. Yeah, this almost certainly was some kind of VR demo for either a museum or for showing off some kind of technology that failed. $4.49 on Steam. English is not supported. What language is supported? German only. Yeah. Well, that's easy enough to dismiss as it's German only. But also it makes for some more weird listings on Steam. There was this Amazon Prime show that was really nasty, mean-spirited in my opinion, from the first level, and kind of just mean-spirited throughout, in the way it treated characters, the way it treated the audience, the way the messages it was sending to the audience. So I wouldn't really recommend it. It's called Utopia. It's based around this this idea that there's a comic book out there that actually told the life of someone, and it predicted many plagues and viruses, which eventually fairly quickly you realize it's because someone was genetically creating the viruses and plagues. But one of the things one of the characters does, and this is a long way to get to a very simple thought, is he has everyone at his dinner table go around the table and say, what have you done to earn your place in this crowded world? Which maybe slightly is a nasty thought if you think it all the way through anyways, that you have to justify your existence. But it certainly falls in line with my own feeling about Steam. Like, if there literally was just one person that said, that emailed some of these listers, some of the publishers, and said, can you just give me a short paragraph to justify the existence of your game being listed on Steam? Like, why does this game deserve to be on Steam? That should be a questionnaire at the bottom of the field. And if they come back with, I don't know, or if they leave it blank, or if they say, because free markets should allow us to compete, if they're making any kind of argument that at the very least isn't talking about the quality of your game, then they should be immediately rejected. Now, also, if they came back and said, our game is the best game ever created, and then you look at it and obviously it's not a good game at all, it's just a low effort asset flip game, then there might be more arguments to eliminate games that way. The bigger thing is, if you just have a forum that should be unique to each game being listed, and you get canned responses in that forum, then you know that it's probably the same person flooding Steam with the same games, even if they're doing it under different publishers or under different company names. But yeah, a little bit of pushback there. Just justify your existence on Steam.
You've walked into the wrong forest, friend.
Okay. If I play this, and then all this,
Winds of light, show your might.
and then hit that,
Life's fate is that.
that one, and that one. Gametsu had a tweet here. Peggy has rated Tales from the Borderlands for the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC in December, which doesn't make a lot of sense. It's being listed by Take-Two Interactive, though, instead of Telltale Games. So Take-Two Interactive has gotten the rights to Tales from the Borderlands, because Telltale Games, the original Telltale Games, not the company that bought their name, went out of business. And I guess they're going to re-release Tales from the Borderlands on PC and release it for the first time on Xbox Series and PlayStation 5. Which, okay. Does that mean there's any reason why I would want to go back and play Tales from the Borderlands a second time? No, not really. There was very surface level choices you could make that kind of just boiled down to what kind of bullet you were going to shoot somebody with. And that was it. The main storyline, particularly for even a Telltale game, was not very divergent in the Tales for the Borderlands series. Next, we have a game on Steam that's just a bunch of Asian characters, and it just looks like it's military simulation game of some sort. But what I immediately noticed when looking at the video here is that they were showing you a helicopter, and the helicopter could not even smoothly fly across the screen. It was hitching back and forth. So yeah, let's just go back. See how it's just glitching there. This is early access, English not included, Chinese $4.19. Does it change the equation any if we, on top of seeing tons of low effort asset flip Chinese games, or just usually the Chinese games aren't even asset flips. I'm just used to saying that phrase so much. Usually it's just low effort Chinese games. If we start seeing military Chinese, like military propaganda Chinese games, does that really change the equation? I think you have to kind of hold your tongue on any real criticism there, because it would be fairly hypocritical to say, oh, these Chinese games are just Chinese military propaganda, when, let's face it, there is a significant amount of Western US military propaganda games out there, or at least things that could be called propaganda, like all the Call of Duty, all of the what is the other one? I think Counter-Strike is US military. There's just so many out there under that you could make that same claim to. So it would only be fair to start complaining if we saw, I suppose, more than 200 Chinese military games appear in a very short amount of time. I think it is also fairly fair to say that games like Call of Duty often also depict the negatives of the U.S. military too, and atrocities that the U.S. military often commit, or that contractors commit for the U.S. military. So it's not pure propaganda on that part. And then at a certain point you could call almost anything propaganda if you expand the definition in your head enough. So I'll try real hard to bite my tongue on making that accusation. Next we have a game on Steam called Strike Team Gladius, which looks like a hex grid based shooter in some elements, and then you zoom down in other elements. So yeah, you seem to have two different perspectives here. They're calling it a sci-fi turn-based tactical RPG, so you must zoom in for like cutscenes. $17.49 English full on you. This would probably in the 90s be a very interesting thumbnail image, but nowadays it's not quite so much, and it's not even what they used over there. That's just too expensive a game for what it is, so I'm gonna have to say no to that one.
In the name of justice.
Okay, what can we do? Stormbane Ward. I can evolve that.
My blade is your salvation.
And I could do 2 more damage. That seems to be about all I can do. I need to kind of hurry up here. I had a decent amount of news today because I had spent some time yesterday opening up extra tabs, and now I'm regretting it quite a bit because I started late and I had network trouble that basically restarted the stream, and on top of that, there's not a lot to talk about. Gametsu has an article here. Winning Post 9 2021 delayed to April 15th. The Winning Posts horse racing games never get translated to the West, unfortunately. Although I think also the horse racing stuff could easily get shut down. There was a popular opinion, and that was probably going to fade in Japan anyways. People were just losing interest. Although it seems to me that what happens a lot in Japan is it's not the average Japanese citizens that like horse racing. And the same, I think, is the same scenario for eating whale meat. It's not that people in general overall of Japan are interested in that. It's that the rich politicians and maybe their lobbyist friends are into that. So I wouldn't be surprised one bit if it turned out that horse racing is super popular amongst rich and elite citizens of Japan. And that's why it wouldn't potentially die out. However, I imagine horse racing in the pandemic is probably not going to work very well. A bunch of people in the stadiums crowded together, or even the horses themselves potentially getting COVID. I don't know if horses can get COVID or not, actually. I know dogs and cats can, and it seems like obviously bats and several other species of animals can, so I wouldn't see a real reason why it wouldn't be communicable to horses. Moving on, we have a Gematsu article. Mercenaries Blaze, Dawn of Twin Dragons for PS4 is now available in Japan. This looks like an old school placement RPG. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't come to the West. Oh, it's also available on the Switch worldwide. Well, okay. So it is available.
The resplendent phoenix graces you with her presence.
That's a slightly interesting way of things to go about, because it implies that it was an afterthought to include the PlayStation 4, and the first thing was to get it on the Switch worldwide, which would definitely imply a large amount of disinterest for the PlayStation 4 or the PlayStation 5 in Japan, which is something that we've consistently seen.
There's a lot more where that came from.
Next, we have a game on Steam here called Yumi, which is tagged sexual content, strategy, puzzle, anime. And so you've got a bunch of images here of a Chinese-looking lady in a Chinese-looking dress. And then you see the real game, and it's a flat 2D adventure game. It's like, boy, is that deceptive advertising if I've ever seen it. Like, I bet these scenes are in the game, but these are probably the only scenes in the game. You can see it's already mixed reviewed. It's $2.69 with a free adult patch, and it's Japanese full audio. But yeah, I don't think there's enough here that would even make it worthwhile to put on the fall list. Also, when you have a publisher called Lovely Games and the developer is the exact same name as the product, that screams fly-by-night company that has no intention of ever publishing or listing another game under that title, under that name. And at a certain level, I guess maybe Steam probably should crack down on people that literally don't understand the forms that they're filling out when they're making a game page. For instance here, if the developer, Screenbox Studio here, just was called Ancient Abyss, that should raise a red flag, and there should be an email sent back and saying, hey, is your company really named Ancient Abyss? Because you also said that was the name of your game, and we're questioning that. And then if they can't even respond to an email in understandable English, you should say, all right, your game is delisted. We only do business with people that can hire either somebody to translate it into broken English or
I am your victory, your salvation.
or can speak English directly. Like, and
The untold darkness
that's
for the righteous.
at a certain level you could say is just being xenophobic and anti-foreigners, but on another level that's kind of just business. Like, I'm not going to go into Mexico City and try to do a business deal with someone speaking just Spanish because I don't fluently speak or understand Spanish. That's just not going to work. Or if I was going to do that, I would at least pay an interpreter to be with me so I can make that business happen. But if you're just, on Steam's case, paying $100, putting a bunch of gibberish in the fields, or just putting the wrong information in the fields, then you're not really giving the right responses to what is being asked of you. Moving on, though, we have Ancient Abyss here. This looks like a hack and slash kind of RPG game. Doesn't look terrible. Doesn't look amazing either. One thing I would say is this one character you see, it's drawn a little soft pastel like, where I think I'd kind of like to see this character more drawn sharper. So it's $13.49 English and Chinese. I'm going to put this on the follow list. I think there might be a game here. It's mostly positive, 71% so far. I guess theoretically I could put that straight on my wish list, but I'm going to hold off on that for a while. Alright, we need to play this. And then evolve this.
I will save you no matter the cost.
Then hit this. And then this. And then this one. And then that one. And then this.
The enemy I seek. Draw your blade.
So I've just won the game. Or at least I think I won the game, because this summons more versions of Seraphs until the final Seraph is summoned and it wins the game. So unless he can do 20 damage to me in this one turn, which he would have only been able to do 10 damage, I think, anyways, I've got it. This is the first time, though, that this strategy has ever worked. Nope, it doesn't work. Darn it. Well. This can limit my health, at least. I can do this.
Serves as a powerful talisman.
Well, we could play this next turn. So this is Instatute Seraph. This is Renaissant Seraph. I think Awakened Seraph was in between the two. This one is going to summon Seraph Lapis Glory B with last words of winning the match and a countdown of 1. Gamatsu has an article here. Resident Evil Showcase is set for January 21st, featuring Resident Evil Village trailer, gameplay, and franchise news, which yeah, they are trying to build up more hype around it. Apparently, this lady is supposed to be super, super tall from perspective, which, okay. This definitely feels very much like Resident Evil 4, just being done all over again, which is not a bad idea. Although it does then create an interesting thought. Yep, Seraph Lapis Chloe B. So if I play this now, it gets destroyed. Now it's Awakened Seraph. You can't really look at the art here.
I soar the skies in the name of justice.
And is there anything we need to do? Nope. Let's just kill that guy just for the fun of it. There is definitely danger though getting too overhyped around Resident Evil Village, because you're either going to have to buy that Resident Evil 3 was the bad game of the last 4 or 5 bad Resident Evil games, or you have to admit that they are due for another bad Resident Evil game. Unless they do something, unless you can put faith in Capcom that they are just have finally broken the cycle of doing some bad Resident Evil games versus good Resident Evil games. So yeah, it really comes down to just how much faith are you willing to put into Resident Evil. Capcom. Alright, let's play this. I guess we'll just start with Portal Craft and we'll just go in circles. Here we have a game on Steam called Golden Rails Small Town Story. This is a strategy management game for $5.59, English, German, Russian. Not my style of game, so I'm going to skip it. I think I may have to just leave a lot of games on Steam for Monday, because I want to wrap up here, frankly, and I've done all the daily quests. Gamatsu has a article here. Akita Oga Mystery Guide, the Frozen Silver Bell Flower for PC is now available in Japanese. This is a Famicom style mystery adventure game that I doubt will ever get translated. And there is a certain level here where we may hit this point where there are nostalgic games getting released for the Japanese audience, so we'll start to see more and more Famicom like nostalgia style games that don't have any audience in the West, so that could create a splitting of the two major fields of video games, which are arguably the Eastern style of games and the Western style of games are fairly split even now. So it would be a shame to see hundreds upon hundreds of Japanese only, Asian only style games coming out and no games from Japan being targeted to the Western world. And it's kind of consistently always been the case that Western games have never been targeted to the Eastern world, or even really considered the Eastern world much. Anyways, Gamatsu has an update to their Famitsu sales. I think what they're doing, because usually we'll get like 2 numbers originally and then it'll get updated to much higher numbers. I think what they're doing is listing either the hardware sales first, and then their software sales is getting updated more. Seems like the PlayStation 5 did a little bit better this week, but we still have a full list here of 29 out of 30 games being for the Nintendo Switch.
I could never in the sun.
So, what I'll probably try to do going forward is make sure I only talk about the Famitsu sales when it's updated with the software sales instead of hardware sales. Hardware meaning, in this case, I think games that are on disc versus being bought through shops, through storefronts. Gametsu has an article here. A-Train All Aboard Tourism official English website opened. The first English screenshots of the business simulation game. Yeah, I'm not sure that's anything I'd want to play. Let's see. Rush.
Do you know my master?
And this.
Cleansing
And
mode.
hit that.
Time to head home.
And evolve that.
Coming at you.
Give me some. Unbelievable.
We have a game called Buddy Mission Bond that has a demo now available in Japan. This looks to me like it's probably a visual novel, but I could be wrong about that. There's a lot of trailers here. What kind of game is this? Well, these two guys are handcuffed to each other, and I guess that's
I embrace all manner of spellcraft.
that's something. There was an Amazon Prime video I watched that was animated sort of like this that looked really, really terrible. It was a Western animation based on, I guess, a comic book, it felt like, but I'm not sure. Like it felt like something based on a comic book, but it also felt like it was based on a comic book somebody self-published and got less than 1,000 sales on. And I don't know how there would have been enough funding for it to have gone as far as it did. But it oddly had like William Shatner doing the beginning and the end intro, which is probably not that expensive. So it more than likely would have been like some rich kid's project. But yeah, I don't know. I have a clue what this game is. It looks like it's half adventure, half visual novel. Okay.
Can you keep me company?
Do that. And then do that. And then end the turn. Here we have that game Erica, now available for iOS, according to Gamatsu. This was originally a PS4 game that came out in 2019, live action game. I saw some people cover it and they weren't particularly enthralled with it because it kind of was just like a split path visual full motion video story where there, I don't think were a lot of gameplay elements in it. It's also a strange game in its releases here that it kept itself as a PlayStation 4 exclusive and then it jumps to iOS. Like why not do iOS and Android? And why not at some point be on PC? It obviously, I don't think did come out on PC, or if it did, like nobody cared that it came out on PC.
I could never set foot in the sun. Dancing in circles.
Let's go and evolve here.
Now the fight begins.
Give me strength.
And hit that.
I failed.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Rogue Waves, which looks like it's a build your own machines on water, which seems like being limited to water is quite the hindrance compared to just being able to build machines on land and maybe make some that work on water. $9.99 English only. Yeah, I don't think there's a real product here. Not something I'd want to play. Here we have a game on Steam called Dualism, which seems to be some kind of bullet hell shooter, like Ikuraga, in which you change from being black and white, and the black bullets go through you if you're black, or you get absorbed. You absorb them for energy if you're black, and you take damage when you're hit by the white. At least that's how Ikuraga worked. $9.44 English full audio. The visuals here are just not that good to justify that. Okay. Do this, and I do this, that won't work. Do we want to do anything here?
I could never set foot in the sun.
You're through.
Give me strength.
Okay. How are we gonna win? Put that on the field. And then we have 2 health. So we've got to kill more than 2 things. So you gotta hit that.
Is this all I can do?
And then you gotta hit that.
You've done that too. If only you knew.
That's not really gonna save me. OpenCritic has an article. Gamers can try out these 3 Xbox titles for free this weekend. Which games are they talking about? Dragon Ball Z Fighter Z, Ukulele, and Star Wars Squadrons. Okay. So some free weekends for those games. I probably buried the lead quite a bit. A new Pokemon Snap now has a release date. I don't recall them even announcing a new Pokemon Snap game, so it's somewhat amazing. Although maybe they did announce it and they just didn't have anything to show, and then that kind of made it easily forgettable. Seems like we've got a new guy here, not Professor Oak. Trailer was released. Let's see if we can see the trailer on YouTube without
Mother, father, come on.
going crazy with it.
You must die.
So yeah, this definitely feels like improved visuals, which the number of routes are definitely going to be a problem, and the number of like Pokemon and the scoring system in general are going to be issues. It doesn't seem to me like this is just a complete remaster or remake of the first game. So that's good, because the thing we wouldn't want to see there is them just having you go down the same paths. And if you had played Pokemon Snap recently, it would have been the exact same experience. Seems like you can play as a girl or a guy, which that should be a fairly easy option. Yeah. Let's do that. And then I suppose there is a question also, just as far as, are there going to be new elements? Because you really only had some attract sprays and some food in Pokemon Snap, and it feels like there should be a few more things that you can do. Yeah. and I'm not seeing any scenes that are showing any kind of scoring mechanic. I wouldn't be super surprised if it turns out that there isn't actually a scoring mechanic in the game, and that it is just this incredibly laid back experience. Which maybe it should just be an incredibly laid back experience. That's not the worst thought ever.
I'm coming. Detestable. You wouldn't. You wouldn't.
But yeah. I would be excited to play Pokemon Snap if I had a Switch. Do I have a Switch? No. Is the reason I don't have a Switch is often around the fact that there isn't a ton of games I'd want to play. So one more games in the column of yes, I would like to play it is nice. But I don't know what else you can really say around that. That is just kind of what it is, and it still feels like a Metroid game would be really nice. But not that. Like a Metroid Prime game is still in development. I'd like to see that come out, and I'd like to see some other things happen. Right, so we now have 20 shadows. So we can attack here, here, and here. Moving on, Gamma Sutra has an article. Battle.net gets a fresh coat of paint and improved navigation, accessibility, and more. Unfortunately, most people have no interest in doing business with Activision Blizzard, and I have no interest in going back to Hearthstone. There are still a decent number of people that are getting back to World of Warcraft, and I imagine there's always going to be a contingent of people playing StarCraft, StarCraft 2, Diablo 2, Diablo 3. I don't even think Diablo 2 actually uses Battle.net. Battle.net in particular is the obvious choice if one like company-centric launcher platform / storefront needs to die. It obviously should be Battle.net. Like, at least the Epic Store got away from just being a store for 3 or 4 Epic games. And Good Old Games has a lot of other games that aren't from CD Projekt Red. There we go. Yeah. Well, we're making progress in the Battle Pass at least. But more and more, I still don't feel like I would want to buy the Battle Pass. It's really, really hard to make that argument to say I would want to buy the Battle Pass for Shadowverse when I'm not consistently playing Shadowverse and not having fun with it most of the time. I'm just gonna cycle through every possible deck. Gamma Sutra has a blog here, Getting Your Big Break 2021 edition for video game music composer. So apparently they're gonna do a whole series here. Being a musical composer in general is a go nowhere career, and like the first thing they're saying is get the education, then get the reputation, then get the contacts. It's like, so get millions of dollars, not millions of dollars, get hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in debt by getting probably a PhD required level of education, then get reputation for being liked. Being a composer, even for like movies and TV, has become way worse a career path than it was even before, because there's so many directors, writers, and producers that just want to play music they've already heard or music that's owned by the same company. If you go and try and make work for Warner Brothers, for instance, to be a composer, you're not really going to do much because they just want you to put Warner Brothers, Warner Music Group music in their movies, and you won't have original soundtracks, which don't sell. Soundtracks in general, I imagine these days, don't sell. You won't be able to compose much. Even if you're working on something like Star Wars, all you're really doing is making copies of the soundtracks of the previous Star Wars, and even though that is the same guy that's worked on all the Star Wars, he's probably the most famous composer. I think his name is John Warner, but I could be totally wrong about that. Like, he's probably the most famous composer, and I can't guarantee I even know his name for the Star Wars soundtrack, which just really goes to show you how you have no hope at all. Now, if you were an indie game developer and you wanted music, maybe you try to compose your own, but then also you probably aren't that good at music if you're good at making games, and vice versa. And so if you think you can compose your own movie and write a video game, you're probably weak in one of those two categories, and you should identify which and adjust your focus to be focused on one or the other. There's a big difference between composing music for specific scenes and in video games or movies or stories, and just writing songs and being in a band that also. So yeah, I just don't. I feel like this kind of article, more than any other article, is a poison apple towards people to make them think that they could actually succeed in a field where you can't really succeed. There is also certainly the open source music that a lot of streamers use that you could use in your game otherwise, or licensed music you could use in your game otherwise. That almost any game developer would use that instead of dealing with a composer, unless it's a major project. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if The Last of Us 2 had some individually composed music in it. But I also know Last of Us 2 definitely had some songs and references to songs in it also. It also feels like a career where you almost certainly have to charge what would sound like an insane amount of money to just keep yourself in business. Something along the lines of, oh, you want me to compose a soundtrack for this game? That'll be like $100,000 to $200,000 because this will be the only thing I'll work on for the next year or longer. Next, we have an interesting looking game on Steam here called Cory, which it looks like a stealth game where you're playing as what I would describe as a African or maybe Greek lady.
You must die.
Looking at the environments.
Come on.
You're playing as Persephone to find your way through the dangerous underworld. Interesting. Interesting choice of depiction of Persephone, but I'll take it. It's free. Is this a student project? Yes. University of Central Florida's FIEA game dev program over 8 months, English full audio. Now, this is a great point to make as a game developer. Sure, like almost certainly a significant portion of video game developers in college are going to be flaming liberal SJWs, and they're going to do something like putting a African American looking woman as Persephone, although Persephone is a woman, so that's not the inconsistency. The inconsistency would be that would a Greek Roman god like Persephone, a Greek god, I think, would that ever in the minds of Greek people be African, dark skinned, and or with red hair? And the answer would absolutely be no. Every single depiction we've seen of any of the Greek gods has been pale white skin. But you can kind of make a statement here as a student project, and nobody's going to really care and go a little wild and go a little crazy, whereas people would probably complain a lot more if this was a finished product. Also, I think you'd probably complain a lot more about this game because it's only 15 to 10 minutes. But it looks polished enough, certainly, to be in the category of student projects I'd like to cover and talk about more. So that goes to the wish list. Let's see. Why do I have a games done quick video being linked to? Oh no. Don't know why I opened that link. So we'll skip that. That must have been a random click, or maybe a link to something that I didn't realize I was linking to.
Don't call me short.
An honest day's work. Shutting down.
Well, G4 TV here is kind of now to a white with a purple outline logo, where it was blue before. It seems like they are just playing around with the logo quite a bit, changing it on Twitter. They put out this thing, Adam Sessler and the Completionist, which Super Beard Bros, the Completionist is one of the Super Beard Bros guy who often makes the same jokes over and over again. Although Adam Sessler is so old that I wouldn't be surprised if he makes the same jokes over and over again too. They've got this video where it seems like they're streaming together. And so then they apparently put a YouTube video up, and then they premiered the YouTube video. That's interesting because that was the question. Certainly, here's where is G4 going, and on the looks of it, it's going to Adam Sessler just streaming from his abode with maybe some random people. I don't know if Morgan Webb is really showing up ever again. It doesn't seem like this is the video that they're showing now is a full video. You have to click on the link to get to the full video.
Did you want it?
So yeah, it seems like it's straight up just G4 TV as a YouTube channel is just going to be a YouTube channel. It premiered 2 hours ago. We can see so far it's gotten 346 comments, 12,500 views. The channel itself has only gotten 1,000,019 views and 290,000 subscribers, which is still way more than me. If we start to see that the Completionist is just going to be working with G4 going forward, that's a little bit weird. They've definitely done some post-production here, and they seem like they're more talking to each other than they are actually playing a game. If anything, it's kind of like they're talking about games. I think they're talking about games that are coming out in 2021. So why is this Morgan Webb? Why is this the Completionist you're talking to instead of Morgan Webb or somebody else? And frankly, if the completionist is the biggest celebrity now for G4, because Adam Sessler potentially at any point could retire, it's not the best start, I think. I think you either want completely new people that you've never heard of, or PewDiePie. Like, that's pretty much all I think you could pick. People like PewDiePie or Markiplier. I don't think the completionist is popular enough. Let's see if we've got a link to here, even what even the completionist says. Interesting. Let's go ahead and Google completionist YouTube. See his channel. Like, here we can see the completionist YouTube channel is at 1.4 million subscribers. Of course, I'm at, like, as far as views, 3,000, where they're at 6.35 million, so I'm nowhere to compete in the last 30 days. Much smaller. But yeah, that subscriber count, pretty small there, for compared to the like 20 million, I think, views PewDiePie has, subscribers PewDiePie has. I'm also vaguely recalling that there was a controversy around Adam Sessler, sort of, in the fact that he was the boss of at Revision 3 when Revision 3 Games was trying to do something, and then it turned out one of his employees was like sexually harassing all of the co-workers, and it definitely felt like it wasn't particularly a well-run company, Revision 3 Games. And at a certain level, you are potentially making the argument here that G4 has failed once. Adam Sessler, as the boss at Revision 3 Games, that failed. Several other companies have failed as far as video game channels. Giant Bomb has been acquired by a whole different company, and they just cleaned out their offices this week out of the CBS building. Although that may just be a case of them moving people to different buildings more than anything else.
May all life prosper and be blessed.
See, here's the problem with this. You evolve this so you can attack.
Once I believe I am the void, and these wings.
That doesn't even work. OpenCritic has an article here. EA executive says the publisher has multiple Star Wars projects in development. I think EA said the exact same thing 2 years ago, so it's really not changing much. Like, EA has been somewhat notorious over the past 5 to 10 years with having Star Wars projects start and then be canceled. And maybe that's because those projects were going to turn out very bad, or maybe it's just because they are stringing people along, or stringing along Disney in particular, so that they could keep the license. Although they don't seem to really have an exclusivity license anymore. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Puzzle Quest developer Infinity Plus 2 has been acquired by 505 Games parent Digital Bros. Which, okay, 505 Games isn't a company I recognize. 505 Games, which published Control and the PC version of Death Stranding, is now moving into free-to-play multi-platform approach. Interesting for the Puzzle Quest series. I think the Puzzle Quest series is relatively decent, but boy, does that seem like a cognitive dissonance between Control. Very, very different kinds of games there. Here we have a game on Steam called Revenger. It's just an asset flip first-person shooter. English full audio, $2.99. I'm gonna try and burn through these games fairly quickly. There's really nothing to see there. Here we have a game called Word Game Zero, which looks like it's an Asian black and white game that's using like Asian ASCII to make levels. It's free, Chinese only. It's not particularly impressive. The only thing that's really different there is because you're using Chinese, you can potentially spell out some things, whereas if you were doing it in English, you probably aren't spelling anything with the ASCII words in the ASCII art. Here we have a game on Steam called Down in Bermuda, which is tagged as a casual indie puzzle game. And I think that's kind of what it is. Seems to be a combination of very simplistic games. That's about all I can figure. Doesn't seem like there's a lot going on here. So it's going to come down to price, I guess. $11.99, bunch of languages. I'm going to put this on the fall list, but that does seem a little pricey. 1 damage. Draw a card. See. Game of Sutra has an article here. Universal has delayed the opening of the Super Nintendo World again due to COVID-19. Which, that seemed like that was obviously going to be the case, but I don't know why they kept trying to push it and have it happen. Because I definitely was wondering about that they were announcing it basically in the middle of a newly renewed lockdown. That they were going to open the Super Mario World in Japan, and it's like that doesn't make any sense. I think we're going to see more and more of that happen, though. We're going to have companies announcing that they're going to do things that they couldn't possibly pull off, and pretending like they're doing business as usual when there's no way that's actually going to happen. Gematsu has an article here. Psychotic Colossus Down for PS4 and Switch launches January 28th. This is, I think, that beat-em-up game with the kind of Adventure Time art style. Yeah, it is, with the giant pig monster and giant robot. It's currently available on Xbox One and PC. Don't think I've seen any reviews for it yet. Let's see, well, 4, this, evolve,
This match is mine. A revelation.
okay.
Death draws near.
Hit that. Tech Raptor has an article here. Mario Kart Wii speedrunner pulls off a Rainbow Road Ultra shortcut with an estimated huge percentage chance to do it right, which almost certainly assumes that this video is going to immediately be accused of cheating. and editing the footage or using a task-assisted software. And frankly, Mario Kart Wii is not a modern enough game to interest most people, except for the speedrunning community, so it's kind of news for only a very small select group of people. Alright, well, let's take that out. And then take that out. And then take that out. Then end the turn. TechRaptor has an article here. Riders Republic delay announced by Ubisoft. So, what looks like a combination snowboarding, BMXing, and motocross game has been delayed. Yep. I imagine we will start to see more delays as we approach the point in which you would have to either actually release your game in the first quarter or delay it to the second quarter. We're still in the first half of the first quarter, yeah, but people are certainly thinking ahead and looking ahead and seeing that things aren't going to improve probably very quickly. Gamatsu has an article here. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night Classic Mode and a Kingdom crossover update is now available. It adds new stages, sub-bosses, and difficulty modes in an 8-bit aesthetic world. Which, okay. So, it seems to just be a free update by the looks of it. It doesn't seem like it is something you have to actually pay for. So I kind of wonder how that works on PC. Is it just you switch the modes in the menu when you launch? It's going to be, I think, slightly a shame if it turns out that Bloodstained Ritual of the Night gains so much success that on mobile instead of on the platforms. I don't know why I think it's on mobile. Though it didn't say it was on mobile. It says it's on PC, PS4, Switch, and Xbox One. Yeah. I thought there was a Bloodstained game or a variant of the Bloodstained game that came out on mobile. That must be the 8-bit looking one, though. It must not be the main game. But yeah. It would really suck if Bloodstained all of a sudden started focusing on the mobile market instead of the console market or the PC market. But I don't think people would like that. That's kind of the same problem that Konami has, is that they've tried to sell Castlevania games on cell phones for the and I think there's not really an audience there. TechRaptor has an article here. Returnal combat will store upgradable weapons and risky buffs. Returnal, I believe, is the one game where you're inside someone's head or dreams and you're fighting these giant monster-like creatures, or you're inside your own nightmares or something. It looks fine so far as just a shooter, and at the core of it, that may be all that's necessary, because it could be that this is a really good shooter with just a really dumb story, and that would put it in like the category of something like Borderlands, and plenty of people would still play it. Summon 5 of these.
Golly, it's chilly here.
Just to lose, I guess. Yeah.
How did I lose?
We already talked about Riders Republic being delayed. Apparently it was coming out on the Stadia. If you look at the Gamatsu listing here: PC, PS5, PS4, Stadia, Xbox One, Xbox Series. This list is going to just get longer and longer as the years go by if we maintain momentum like this. I need to play one more game, but I am not particularly happy that I need to play one more game. Gamma Sutra is getting back into promoting their GDC Masterclass, and then which I guess is going to replace their Gamescom or GDC presentations. Like, same parent company owns Gamma Sutra that owns GDC, so it's self-serving interest to promote that. And arguably, we might start to see some better, more diversity of thought. Maybe not better thought, but maybe just more diversity of thought with the death of things like GDC, where game developers all get together behind closed doors and discuss. Supposedly they discuss game development, but often it comes off as they are discussing just SJW tactics to censor the comments and make games that they want to make without doing the market research to know their audience. Gamma Sutra has a blog here, Long Dark Survival game HUD user interface. It's talking about how they worked on their heads-up display and user interface to try and improve the way it looks. I'm not sure they really succeeded greatly. User interface design certainly deserves some thought, and if you're into game development and argument, a article like this would probably be somewhat helpful. But here they're talking about Mirror's Edge, where Mirror's Edge basically had no heads-up display at all in the game, and it played perfectly fine. In fact, it played really, really well with that concept.
Welcome home.
See, well, if we keep hitting articles that are just the same articles over and over again, then we may be able to wrap up faster. TechRaptor has this opinion piece: PlayStation 3 exclusives that need to come to the PlayStation 5. Metal Gear Solid Legacy Collection, that's Konami, not probably likely to happen. I'd like to see Infamous and Infamous 2 come to PC, and if that means they have to come to PlayStation 5 also, that would be great. Heavenly Sword, I think, was a really good game. It may not look as pretty. It was very, very pretty when it came out for the PlayStation 3. May not look that good. The bigger point to mention here is because they're talking PlayStation 3 exclusives, that means all these games were programmed to run on the Cell processor and nothing else. So you're basically at that point going to have to completely reprogram the games, or at least recompile them, which is not a simple port. So it makes sense, really, that Infamous hasn't come to PC. It makes sense that Heavenly Sword hasn't come to PC. But yeah, the game Pain, I thought that did come to PC, but apparently not. Tales of Xillia and Tales of Xillia 2, I've never even heard of that. But I imagine there's probably a decent collection of PlayStation 3 exclusive Japanese focused games. Ratchet & Clank Future Saga, Killzone, Drakengard 3. You haven't heard of that? Motorstorm. Probably is not a game that you would really want to release without just remaking it. I think that is the case for a lot of these, is that they should just soft remake them or remaster them, and not just try and port them. Heavenly Sword, just a soft reboot, would make a decent amount of sense. One of the problems I think with Heavenly Sword in particular is that it's a sword that has 3 different stances that you use to fight with. So it was kind of an awkward fight mechanic for a game that is just a boss rush game that has really interesting story and interesting visuals. Then number 2 they have here is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle. This may very well be a license thing too. What you're not seeing in this list of 10 games though, even though it's probably more than 10 games if you talk about Killzone Trilogy or putting 2 Tales of Xillia games together, what you're not seeing is anything that is incredibly missing, except for maybe Metal Gear Solid Legacy games and Infamous 2. Heavenly Sword not having a sequel is not really that missing. So you could probably have stopped this list at the top 4 because those are the ones that I recognize. I'd much prefer to see all of those come to PC though, and we are very potentially getting to that point if we start to see that there is no interest in continuing to do business with Sony because Sony of Japan's not really involved anymore in the Sony interactive video game development. We may start to see old games getting ported to PC. I also wouldn't be surprised if like the pandemic leads to more people porting old games, because that might be easier in isolation than making new games. So that might happen, but it might not. We might just see a bunch of Japanese companies abandon their old products, which they do a lot. Like, they're very fad-based, and going to somebody and telling them, hey, you should remake Heavenly Sword probably is not something new and interesting to them. Next we have a Gemetsu article, Yomi wa Saku Hana version 1.10 update now available. It adds a new character profile. This is some kind of Japanese dungeon crawler by the looks of it. Yep, you got elf anime characters apparently being voiced by an idol group, which might explain slightly more popularity. Or maybe it's not being voiced by the idol group. Maybe you can just select the idol group as a crossover promotion as characters. New character portraits from Savior of Sapphire Wings, Stranger of Sword City, and Purely Monster. I don't know which one of those would have been the idol group, if any of them are the idol group. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Cyberpunk 2077 ads in Sao Paulo drew fines for violating the law. I think Sao Paulo is the right way it's spelled. I don't think that's a misspelling. But there is also a San Paulo that exists. This was an interesting story when I first looked at it, because the city promoted mural infringes on city clean city laws, which means basically in Brazil they didn't bribe the right people. The clean city laws, I guess, are just they're trying to have a city that doesn't have advertisements on entire buildings, or all over the place, which certainly there is there's some places I have seen where there's just billboards everywhere, and it's just a visual distraction when people are trying to drive, and it's just a ugly way to have your city depicted anyways. So should have attacked with these two first. But yeah, this is the kind of law that you would not have in America because raw capitalism and competition and advertising. Let's see. The Clean City laws forbid most forms of giant outdoor ads. The city does have an impressive urban art community, which also makes occasionally stories high mural. The city ruled that it was an advertisement for the game in question, which it was, obviously, and they fined them $75,000, which I wouldn't be surprised if they just never pay it. Apparently, last September, the company Garena commissioned Nalata to create a 11-story mural for their mobile game Free Fire, which is a battle royale mobile game, apparently. But I don't know what to really say much about that, though. At its core, it sounds like a good law and a good enforcement of that law. But knowing Brazil and knowing how they're broke and the government and the people tend to be pretty scammy, it does kind of feel like the city is literally just trying to line their pockets by enforcing an arbitrary law. But at the end of the day, that's all CD Projekt Red's fault, and they clearly did not do enough research to say, hey, is it a good idea to advertise in Sao Paulo, Brazil in the first place? Is it worth the risk? Is it worth the audience you're going to gain? There's a decent number of gamers in Brazil, obviously, but like they certainly didn't do their research. And we certainly see that in other cases too, because if they had done their research, then they would have at least made Cyberpunk 2077 a better game or delayed it in the first place. Moving on, we have Curse of the Dead Gods launching February 23rd for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. It's currently available for early access on PC. Let's see. I may already have this on the fall list. Top-down twin stick action roguelike. I don't think I've seen this. It's very positive. It is on the fall list. People are really liking it. I guess so. Once that comes out of early access, maybe I'll catch it. Put it on the wish list. I'm not going to go over the Game of the Year for a third or fourth time from TechRaptor, but they are getting particularly annoying about reposting the same article over and over again. Like this is like the third or fourth time they've done that. And they need to desperately stop, or I'm going to have to unfollow them on Twitter. And that would really suck if I have to do that. Do this. I can't play these other than to bury the other one of those. Here's a game that would almost certainly be controversial to play on Steam or on YouTube. Rediscover Evolution with Darwin's Journey. I imagine this is, they're saying it's a Kickstarter right now. I'm not even sure this is actually a video game. This might be a board game. Either way, it almost certainly would be a very boring game because Darwin's observations and journeys are not filled with action and adventure, to say the least.
You're too strong.
Like, as far as I understand it, he just went to the Galapagos Islands and drew a bunch of pictures and observations of animals, which, well, if you put enough action into it, that gets you a decent Pokemon Snap game. It doesn't inherently give you a great experience. Apparently, I've never made it to C3 rank. I find that hard to believe, but okay. Let's see. Let's just try and rush through the rest of the news. I'm going to skip all of the games on Steam and curate them over the weekend. Bungie is shutting down Halo Stats Archive in February. So halo.bungie.net is ending February 9th, 2021. I imagine somebody is going to make an effort to like preserve all of that, but also I imagine the information that's on that site and the stats on that is not particularly useful information or worthwhile information to know. Gamasutra has an article here that the Switch has officially shipped 100 million units in China. Shipped, not guaranteed sold. Shipped means that the units went to a storefront. Doesn't mean that there aren't hundreds or thousands of units sitting in a storefront somewhere or in a distribution center somewhere waiting to be sold and potentially even returned. I don't know if Nintendo would take the returns on Switches, but or if there would be any reason to do it that way, but that is a possibility. See, Gametsu has Ghost and Goblins Resurrection developer diary #1, Arthur returns. So there's a video here if you want to watch the video. I think they're overhyping Ghost and Goblins returning. Gamatsu had another tweet here. Sony Corporate's YouTube upload of the CES 2021 PlayStation 5 segment removed all the third-party release dates from the in-card trailer. So it was here with a whole bunch of bits of information as far as third-party release dates. And now it's here with a slightly, I think, smaller font, but yep. I guess they did not want to be held liable potentially for third-party developers listing their release dates and then missing their release dates. Let's see. Capcom Fighters has decided to cancel the Capcom Cup due to the pandemic. So, alright. So, yeah, another fighting game tournament being canceled. No, not hugely surprising. You can pretty much assume that's going to be the case always. TechRaptor has an article here. Hitman 3's Access Pass system for PC is a mess. Moving from Hitman 2 to Hitman 3 won't be easy. Which, that's just more arguments to not play any of the Hitman games until there's some big combination of the entire series. Because, yeah, last thing I need to do is read an article to figure out how to move progression from one game to another game. Although maybe it doesn't really matter. Maybe you are just better off starting from scratch when you play Hitman 3. TechRaptor has an article here. Materia Collective has been criticized for late artist royalty payments, which I wouldn't be surprised if that's fairly common from happening. And it's a little too inside baseball to read an article about music rights people or music publishers short-changing music creators. Gamma Sutra has an article here. An educational game studio called Cueto nets $6.1 million to finance a VR pivot. I think that is an insane thing to do at this point, to try and make educational VR products. TechRaptor has an article here. A massive Fallout New Vegas mod called Fallout The Frontier releases today. And that's as of today, as of streaming, January 15th. I've got so many games still. Here they have a review for the game Sunlight, which it kind of looks like nice pastel paintings, but nothing really. Sunlight is an aesthetically beautiful game which does not take full advantage of the beautiful environment. The stunning visuals and audio make the short playtime and lack of true exploration elements somewhat disappointing. Pros, beautiful hand-painted environment, stunning choir-performed classical music, leaves you feeling peaceful and relaxed. Cons, extremely short playtime, minimal to no replay value, and the flower picking mechanic is lacking due to dull flower designs. And wow, if you're selling your game on a flower picking mechanic, that is saying something. Let's see, moving on. See, Gamma Sutra has an article. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor has lost its online features, including vendetta missions. So yeah, it really makes it hard to justify playing Shadow of Mordor, which I think is the first game in the series, not the second. Am I wrong about that? So this shows you more than anything, if you're going to play a WB game, you better play it fast, because they're not going to support it. With its loss for Shadow of Mordor, the shutdown notably only affects the first game in the series, as online features remain up and running for Shadow of War. So that's great and all, but also then still kind of sucks, because we are fairly certain the Shadow of War stuff is going to get shut down now too, and I haven't even played Shadow of War, and that doesn't really motivate me to play Shadow of War. They've been particularly nasty as far as trying to force people to play Shadow of War when they wanted you to play it at the price they wanted you to pay, and so it's never been a good offering, even 4 years later, it feels like, since Shadow of War came out. So yeah, I may just skip that game completely. I feel like you got a fairly complete story in the first game. TechRaptor has the Pokemon Snap information, which we've already talked about, but they have a specific list here of all the Pokemon, and while this doesn't seem like this is going to be 450 plus characters, which it doesn't really need to have every single Pokemon by any means. Also, we may have different genders or different shiny versions of the Pokemon. So there can be more variety than you think, just with what seems to be a collection of maybe 80 to 100 Pokemon. That seems like a reasonable number to me. Of course, if it's not the Pokemon that you like, that feels a little different. Okay, so we've got a game here on Steam. I have to go through games now. This one's called Race to Sanity. This is obviously an asset flip infinite runner where you're on a wheelchair. Which it might have been an interesting joke game, but I bet the price is 59 cents, as cheap as you can get. English full on you. So yeah, don't expect much, and this joke game might work for you. Otherwise, avoid it like the plague, knowing that it is just a low effort asset flip game. Yeah, we have a game called Ultimate Summer. which looks like it's a survival horror first-person shooter game. They're calling it a mix of tower defense and classic shooter. Yeah, this does not look visually polished enough, and it doesn't seem to have gameplay elements that really interest me. It's just all over the place. Early access, $3.19 English and Polish. I'm going to skip that one. Here we have Base Cat Ball Jupiter Basketball and Cat, which that doesn't make any sense as a title. And visually it doesn't really make any sense. $2.39 English and Portuguese Brazil. Yeah. Apparently it's some kind of puzzle game. Yeah, it does seem just like to not it just seems like nonsense. Some of these games just feel like nonsense these days. Here we have a game called Doomsday Room, which is a Cold War strategy simulation game that looks like it's just all going to be basically a text-based, almost visual novel. $19.99 is way too expensive. English only. We can reject that. Here we have a game called Farmer's Life Prologue, which we know is a demo and it's already mixed. And yeah, it just looks like an asset flip game. It's free, English and Polish. And we're getting an influx of Polish games today. Here we have a game called Shimmer, which is an asset flip first-person shooter military game with nothing to impress. $8.99 English only. Like, I could have definitely curated some of this. Here we have a game called Knight's College, which is a visual novel with furries. And I don't want to immediately reject things just because they're furries in it. So, $22.49 English and Japanese. I think the expense there probably rejects it. But I'll be super careful and put it on the fall list. But that is way too expensive in my boat to take that risk. Here we have a game called Diving Disorder, which looks like it's a visual novel. Maybe Chinese visual novel. English not supported, $2.09. Chinese, full on you. The Chinese visual novels, though, do have a tendency to seem like they're getting better. They're showing us screenshots with people. They seem to actually have a story. They're not overwhelming you with tons of text on the screen in many of the screenshots. So, I don't know. At this rate, we might hit a point where visual novel games from China and Chinese games in general just improve by leaps and bounds. You might hear in a year or two me singing the praises of Chinese games on average for their high quality components. Like that would certainly be getting your hopes up at this point, but that'd be very interesting. Also, I want to be careful though to not be a teacher that gets their hopes up the one day that the disruptive child doesn't throw a fit. Although, frankly, I think in teaching you probably should highly praise even 5 minutes of good behavior in some children, because they need like a constant positive feedback loop to counter the negative feedback loops that they've been getting up until that point. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Z-Blood Mission, which just looks like it's a kind of asset flip for zombie shooter game. It's interesting that there's multiple floors in this game. It almost feels like Comic Zone in that aspect, where there were multiple panels in Comic Zone. And there's some physics here where the zombies are falling downstairs or getting blown up by grenades. $8.09. If this was a mobile game, I might consider this, but being on Steam, it just doesn't feel like this is the right zoom in. It would be smarter if you were more zoomed in and you didn't see the floor above you or below you, and you got rid of the indicators on the side. Also, you have kind of a generic, just pre-bought girl with a shotgun character, which, while I do appreciate that visually, it does also scream that there is less of an experience there that you really want to have. Here we have a controversial game, VR Hiroshima 1945. So Hiroshima as it's being nuked, or at least a depiction of something that nobody possibly could have seen and survived. Yeah, this in VR, I'm not sure why you would want to be in a VR experience of the devastation there. And notice that the explosion is just kind of despawning all the buildings. I also feel like there's some inaccuracies here. 1945 back in the day probably had less modern looking buildings in Hiroshima. I'm not 100% sure there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it looked very, very different from what this is being depicted as. $2.99, bunch of languages. Is being bundled in history and slightly educational products. Yeah, this definitely feels like a game company that is trying to flood Steam with educational looking bits of software. But I don't know how much education you even get from being around Hiroshima during it being nuked by the US, other than just a simple history fact being repeated. Yeah. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Rocket Shipment, which just looks like an ugly Lander clone. Early access for no reason, $7.01. That's an odd price tag. Bunch of languages. That's not going anywhere. Here we have a game on Steam called Galaxy V, which I think is possibly an asset flip game from the looks of it. Well, what I can say is in the parts I'm seeing, I'm just seeing empty rooms. I'm not seeing a character with a gun. I'm not seeing any puzzles being solved. Not any screenshots are loading. They want $38.99 for this game. English full audio. That is way too expensive. So that is a hard pass for me. Here we have a game called Project Morpheus Prologue, which looks like an actual game. But do I want the prologue or do I just want the actual game? Interestingly, English is not supported. It's just Chinese. Well, that's a shame. This actually does look like something. Of course, it could just be an asset flip horror game, but even at that, it looks like it's a decently designed one. And the actual game, besides the prologue, it's not available on Steam at all, so I can't even put that on the fall list. Here we have a game called Wind from City, which I think is probably a Chinese visual novel. And I don't like the art style, and the story doesn't look that good. 59 cents, English, Chinese, Japanese. So I'm going to skip that one. Here we have a game that's a bunch of Asian characters. And it's a dating sim. We've started to see more dating sims getting released with no limitation of them coming out specifically on Friday. This one I don't think has any adult content anyways, though. It's $14.39, English not supported, Korean only. Yeah, this did look like Korean writing. They have a slightly different or kind of fairly obvious different way in which they draw their characters. I feel like Korean games probably have more censorship around them. I think probably the Korean publishing laws might be a little bit more of a mess. Alright, so here we have a game on Steam called Survival Draw, which looks like a card game of some sort that's not very visually polished. Early access for $4.49, bunch of languages allegedly. Here we've got one that's all Asian characters. This is that 8-bit looking game. English is not supported, $17.99, Japanese only. So that is on Steam, but it doesn't support English. Here we have a game called Cloud Climber that's rated very positively with quite a few reviews, which is interesting because I would kind of expect this to be more. First person walking sim at the end of humanity, explore the magnificent skybound ruins and learn why they were built. It's free, it's English for full audio. It's from apparently the developer of My Beautiful Paper Smile, which is on the following list and still in early access. So while they're working on their other game, they came out with this game. Alright, well, a free game that's very positively reviewed. I guess I put it on the wish list and then probably never play it because I can just tell people right now to play Cloud Climber if you're interested, and it won't cost you anything other than your time. Here we have a game called Starships, which super dark background even for a space game. Dark screenshot syndrome, $24.99, way too expensive, English full audio. Here's that game Sunlight that we saw reviewed with the beautiful hand-painted pastels. And it's $3.59, English full audio. I'm going to put it on the follow list. We'll see what the average Joe has to say about it. Here we have a game called Arm of Revenge Re-Edition. There's a game called Bionic Commando Rearmed. This is a beat 'em up. It looks like it's nicely animated enough. I don't see anything here that's making this look terrible. $4.99 English Chinese. I'm going to put that on the follow list. Honestly, if I was a new developer, Chinese or otherwise, making a beat 'em up game probably is fairly easy. It's probably a good path to go down to. Don't get complicated, don't get crazy. Don't get too lazy and make a bad visual novel, but have something that has a little bit of action in it. Not a lot. Here we have a game on Steam called Dungeons and Puzzles, which looks a lot like a Zelda game, honestly. $7.19, English, Chinese, Japanese, and Polish. That's an odd combination of languages. I'll put that on the follow list. We got about 10 more games. I could skip some of them, but I think we can burn through all this too. Here we have Amazing Pyramids Rewind, which is a collection of word games and puzzles. $6.29. English, French, German, and Russian. Yep, I'm going to say no to that. Here we have Farm Manager 2021, which I'm going to say no to that. Although at some point I think I might get forced into playing one of these German management games. Or they seem to all be focused towards the German market. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Cyber Rider, which is someone in skin-tight uniform. I assume it's a woman. Like, that is some major butt crack being shown even for a skin-tight leotard, because the only way you get it like that is if you've specifically tightened up the crotch area and loosened up the gluteus maximus part of the outfit. This wouldn't be the first game where we've seen somebody depicting a large-butted character and that being a major selling point. In this instance, though, it really is just an infinite runner when you take your eyes off the butt and look at the actual game, and it's totally not of anything of interest. It's early access for no reason, $1.79. So, yeah, I don't even know if there's anything more to say. Other than I feel like you should always just, in something like that, should be like, I like big butts and I cannot lie. For a second there, I thought I lost the internet connection again. We're getting some drop frames, but it fixed itself. Here we have a game on Steam called Sync, which looks like MS Paint level graphics. $9.99, English, Chinese. Nothing there of interest. Here we have a game called Hexseed, which looks like a hexagon minesweeper game. Which, okay, fair enough. I feel like there have been multiple Hex Sales games that do the exact same thing. So they're just stealing that idea, if not stealing the exact puzzles from Hex Sales. And then this is free to play, but then there's $7.19 for a year one pass. English only. And this does not look anywhere as good as Hex Sales does. So I would definitely point people to playing Hex Sales first and foremost. Here we have a Wolfenstein 3D clone called Smoked Gun, which is just shooting mobsters, I guess, instead of Nazis. I feel like this would make me motion sick playing this in the same way that Wolfenstein 3D did. 59 cents is not a bad price though, English only. So if you just love Wolfenstein 3D and want to play something like Wolfenstein 3D that isn't Wolfenstein 3D, that's an option. Here we have a game on Steam called I Am Robot, which interestingly, not sure if this is a real game or if these are just some pretty screenshots that we're looking at. We have a character that's in her underwear for a while, and they're definitely emphasizing that. Although there is a good argument to be made, like how come we can have ghouls and goblins and have a comedic character, male character in boxers, and not have the same response for having a comedic character in underwear that's actual underwear, instead of being like sexy lacy 90s. Because like, yeah, this is basically the same amount of clothing you would see from someone who is playing volleyball or on the beach, and I guess that's just that there are different perspectives and people think differently about different things. That's a very vague answer. It's funny, they're comparing it to Remember Me. $5.39, English and German. I think there's enough here to put this on the fall list. I'd like to see some reviews on it, at least. Yeah. Here we have a game called Exotium Episode 3, which apparently is a walking simulator, which doesn't make any sense because you have a gun. English is not supported, $1.99, French only. You don't see very many French only games. Here we have a game on Steam called Outcast and Mars, which it's yet another big butted character. This may just be the new trend. It's like, if you've got no better character model to use the big butted character. Let's see, what else do we take from this game? $4.89, English only. Not sure there's much of a game here other than it's probably just a survival game on some kind of asset flip background areas. I probably don't need to put this on the fall list and could just eliminate it, but I'll be cautious and put it on the fall list. Next, we have a game called Gunslinger and Zombies, which is turn-based XCOM style strategy with low polygon graphics in the West. And zombies. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. $4.79, bunch of languages, English full audio. Yeah, that just doesn't have enough appeal. Next we have a game called Lucidscape, which looks like it's a platforming game. It's tagged as player versus event. It's free. It's a student project. It has a third-party EULA. Why does it have a third-party EULA? Yeah, I just don't think there's enough of a game here. But yeah. I'm gonna skip that. It seems to have like only three levels on it. Anyways. Here we have a game called Figment 2 Creed Valley. I feel like Figment 1 is a game I recognize and didn't come out that long a time ago. Prologue for a game that's coming out in early 2021, English full audio. So what you would want to do here is go to Bedtime Digital Games, which made Back to Bed and Chronology, and Figment, which is on the wish list, while making several other games. Most of their games, though, are positively reviewed. So I would need to play Figment 1, which looks a lot like Figment 2, which looks a lot like Bastion. Here we have a game on Steam called Band of Brothers, which looks like it's a Battle Royale game with low polygon graphics. 59 cents, English only. Obviously asset flips too. Here we have a game called EQI, which looks like some trippy visuals put into a video game. First person arcade game with special puzzles and a synthwave soul. Yeah, I don't think this is the kind of game I would want to play. It's free if you're interested. Bunch of languages allegedly supported. Next we have a game called What's Left Behind, a post-apocalyptic city rebuilder. Yeah, nothing visually interesting there. $14.99, English only, that's way too expensive. See, next we have a game called The Underlings, which, yeah, kind of feels like a Stardew Valley game more than anything. It's tagged as an RPG game, $8.99, English full audio. I don't think I want this. Like, seems like there's a lot of just resource gathering and farming in a game like that. Got two more tabs. Here we have a game called Jet Cave Adventure, which seems like it's a platformer with a decent level of polish on it. 2D platform, precision platformer might be slightly frustrating for me. $10.04, English full audio. Yeah, this definitely is a platformer. Cave, jet-powered caveman. Okay, well, we'll put that on the fall list. Fighting dinosaurs, you don't get to do that nearly enough in my book. Finally, we have a game called Lethal Running, which is a top-down twin-stick shooting game. They're calling it an RPG with the tags and a roguelike. Early access, $17.99. I don't see anything that would justify that price. Some of these games do just get eliminated. This is kind of a great example of a game that if you told me this was $5.99 to start with or $9.99, I might put it on the fall list. But when you want $18 for a game that looks like this, then I just feel that you're being greedy, and it's not worth my time to even consider a game like that. So then that brings me to the Humble Bundle store, which I'm not sure we've got any new game bundles. Let me just reload the page just to make sure. No special game bundles, just the monthly Humble Choice, which I never get. Also, it's probably been about 6 months since the last time I bought a Humble Bundle, because the selection has gotten pretty bad for me, considering I have so many games. It's hard to buy a bundle without getting duplicates. See, OpenCritic has a new Persona 5 Strikers trailer showing off the game's action. Now that I'm going to go through my Twitter feed, and then we'll be done with the stream. Just want to see if there's any new bits of news. I did find the person that was retweeting a bunch of political things on my Twitter feed and muted their retweets. So I am now back to my Twitter feed being as apolitical as possibly can be. The Epic Games Store exclusivity muddles the Hitman 3 Legacy DLC promise on PC, according to Gamma Sutra. We may talk about that more on Monday. Scrolling down here and trying to see what's important. According to Gamma Sutra, an analyst says Nintendo Switch outsold every other console in 2020. G4 is retweeting the stream that they did with the Completionist and Adam Sessler. What that really confirms, though, is that Adam Sessler is going to be involved, where I wasn't 100% certain that anybody was going to actually be involved in the new G4, if it was just going to be a whole new class. It's just going to be Saved by the Bell, the new class with, well, not even like that, because I think the original characters, it still showed up in Saved by the Bell, the new class. I think it's just, I thought it would just be all new people. And maybe it will be. Maybe we'll see Adam Sessler act as a transition character for the new G4, and he'll bring in people like the Completionist, and then he'll quickly retire again. In all fairness to Adam Sessler too, his retirement kind of from the video game world was somewhat due, because he was killing himself by being the editor-in-chief of Revision 3 games after G4 had failed. So he kind of immediately got another job doing a lot more work. It's not super surprising that he would have burnt himself out, and then he did stay basically out of the video game world for like 5 years plus, much longer than I imagine any kind of non-compete clause would have really limited him. Interesting. Monolith Productions is promoting some like cosplay for Condemned Criminal Origin. up resolutions of, I think this might be in-game content. I don't think this is, but maybe it is. There's a little Stalker 2 developer update. It's progressing smoothly so far on both Xbox consoles, according to the creators. I don't really care about an update of a game still in development, though. Compulsion Games is hiring. I believe Compulsion Games is the people who made We Happy Few. So it's a little surprising that they're hiring, because I kind of would have thought they would have potentially just gone out of business. That would have been believable. Yeah. And as best as my Twitter feed is working, I think I've seen all the news there that there is. So that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.